Hello everybody. So this video I'm going to talk a little bit about Project 2025 as the time for it is approaching rapidly. I have like 4, maybe 5 short videos of covering different things that I'm going to put out, and then I'm going to drop a longer video that goes a little bit more in depth on what I'm discussing, plus adds to it. Because Project 2025 is not simply just for things against the LGBTQA community. That's the biggest part of it, but it is something that will affect everybody, whether you want to believe it or not. Like, lack of belief does not mean that it is not fact. Much of Project 2025 relates to gender, sexuality, and race, aiming to end most all of the federal government efforts to achieve equity and even collect data that could be used to track outcomes across the public and private sectors. The blueprint encourages the next presidential administration to disband the Gender Policy Council created by Democratic President Joe Biden and undo all of its work. It suggests eliminating diversity, equity, and inclusion (DEI) programs across the federal government. The authors also want to take the following terms out of every rule and regulation: sexual orientation and gender identity, DEI, gender identity, gender equity, gender awareness, gender sensitive, abortion, reproductive health, and reproductive rights. Project 2025 envisions a federal government that denies the existence of transgender people, undermines the right of same-sex married couples, and dismantles services for LGBTQ+ Americans wherever possible, primarily via the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, which the Heritage Foundation proposes renaming the Department of Life. The plan calls for the newly named agency to take the official stance that families are made up of a married father and mother and children, and to redirect federal funds to support a biblically based definition of family. It calls for replacing policies related to LGBTQ+ equity with those that support the formation of stable married nuclear families, and would protect adoption and foster care services that refuse to work with LGBTQ+ married couples. It states that children should be raised by their biological fathers and mothers, and the male-female dyad is essential to human nature. Now, if you heard that, they said that children should be raised by their biological fathers and mothers, and then the male-female dyad. Even their wording is showing that they are putting men first. Women are second rate in Project 2025. Project 2025 equates the act of being transgender or transgender ideology to pornography and declares that it should be outlawed. It claims to cut federal funding for gender-affirming care for both children and adults, which is in line with Trump's own policy proposals. At the Department of Justice, Project 2025 suggests revisiting the Biden administration's assertion that trans minors have a right to gender-affirming care. The plan aims to allow more healthcare workers to opt out of providing such care if they say that they object to it. The plan authors describe gender-affirming care for youth as a social contagion, that especially affects young girls, writing, "The next administration should take particular note of how radical gender ideology is having a devastating effect on school-aged children today." Project 2025 suggests that the CDC should immediately end its collection of data on gender identity, which legitimizes the unscientific notion that men can become women and vice versa. The report also calls for the National Institutes of Health to fund studies into the short-term and long-term negative effects of gender-affirming care, from social affirmation to surgery, and the likelihood of convincing children that they are not transgender through therapy. So that's leading back into conversion therapy. The plan authors also want to reverse policies adopted by the Biden administration to expand the scope of sex discrimination in federal non-discrimination protections, based on the Supreme Court's decision in Bostock versus Clayton County. The landmark case found that LGBTQ+ workers are protected from workplace discrimination, and that gender identity is a protected class of sex. They write, "The president should direct agencies to rescind regulations interpreting sex discrimination provisions as prohibiting discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation, gender identity, transgender status, sex characteristics, and instead direct them to focus their enforcement of sex discrimination laws on the biological binary meaning of sex." Okay, so that was just a little bit. Just a little bit. There's so much more to go. The next video up will be reproductive rights. It's a really short video. Stay safe, everybody.